What if Vader had stopped Alderaan's destruction? In the main story, Tarkin orders the destruction of Princess Leia's homeworld, Alderaan, in order to make an example to the galaxy of what happens to those who oppose the Empire. However, over on the Bantha Discord server, Nessa Elenis asked what if instead Vader had called off this destruction? That's the scenario we'll be diving into today. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Our story commences on the bridge of the Death Star, where Vader stands with Tarkin and Leia, overlooking her home planet of Alderaan. Leia had just given the location of Dantooine to the pair of Imperials in order to save her homeworld from their wrath, and Tarkin commands his subordinates to follow through with the destruction of Alderaan. He wants to show the entire galaxy that the Tarkin doctrine of fear works to maintain order, so he is eager to display the might of his pet project. However, in this scenario, Vader disagrees with Tarkin publicly. He tells the Emperor's favorite Grand Moff that there is a sizable chunk of the Alderaanian population that remains loyal to the Empire, and wiping them out entirely would only stir up sympathy for rebel causes. For once, Tarkin actually considers Vader's words, taking note that perhaps the Dark Lord was right. So instead of firing upon the populated planet, Tarkin orders that instead the Death Star move towards an uninhabited world in the same system. The Tarkin doctrine was still possible to implement without slaughtering loyal Imperial citizens, after all. The Death Star moves away from Alderaan and destroys another planet that orbits the same star, still illustrating the might to those who are watching. Leia thanks the Imperials for their mercy, but Tarkin assures her that if her information was wrong, or if she disobeyed Imperial orders again, then her home planet would be next. How does this impact the rest of our story? Well, let's dive in and find out. One of the major factors that changes about our story is the fact that Leia's adoptive parents remain alive. Bail Organa continues to serve in the Imperial Senate to conspire alongside Mon Mothma and other rebel senators within the Imperial government, even though the Senate is dissolved. He's also still a well-liked public figure. So, when he finds out about his daughter's capture, he's quick to defend her innocence publicly, telling people that she was still a loyal servant to Emperor Palpatine and the galactic government. Eventually, an agreement is reached between Imperial officials and Bail Organa to allow Leia to return to her homeworld, at least until further proof can be found of Leia's involvement with rebel sympathizers. One could even say that she was bailed out of jail. Sorry folks, I had to do that one. Due to Bail and his allies having multiple contacts within the Empire's massive bureaucracy, they're able to conveniently sweep much of the Imperial evidence against Leia under the rug, clearing her name. During this time, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Luke Skywalker, R2-D2, C-3PO, Han Solo, and Chewbacca, what a big gang that is, still make their way to the planet of Alderaan. When they arrive, they aren't greeted with an asteroid belt and the Death Star. Instead, the glistening blue world is there for them to actually land on. Upon touchdown, Obi-Wan contacts Bail and inquires as to the situation. Bail lets Obi-Wan know that he had managed to negotiate a deal with the Empire to get his daughter back, and that she was in safe hands. Obi-Wan asks if they needed any more of his help, and Bail replies that there isn't much that he can think of for the Jedi to help out with at this exact moment, but that he was welcome to attend dinner with his family, since he would always be a friend. Obi-Wan asks the party what they think of this offer. Chewbacca rumbles something about how hungry he is, and Han makes a retort about how he's always thinking with his stomach. Luke nods eagerly, enamored by the beautiful landscape of Alderaan. For his whole life, he had become accustomed to sand dunes and the Twin Suns. Here in Alderaan, there are mountains, trees, lakes, streams. Luke is blown away, and he's eager to learn more about the planet. When Obi-Wan's gang enters Bail's humble abode, well, not so humble, they are greeted by the Senator and his family. Once again, Luke's eyes are wide with awe, and he's quite excited to have finally been able to get off Tatooine. Bail chuckles with Luke, finding his adoration of the planet quite amusing. Luke and Leia also click quite quickly, with Leia finding Luke's youthful exuberance quite charming. C-3PO is quick to interject as well, expressing his excitement to see Leia again, especially after their awful journey on Tatooine. R2 beeps some profanities at 3PO about how much of a wimp he is, and how he hadn't had it that bad on Tatooine, to which 3PO responds with his signature, "Oh, rude," line. Leia asks R2 if he still has the plans, and the droid tells her that they do. Leia is elated, and she quickly whispers to her father that despite the complications, the droids had completed their mission. Bill nods, thanking her for this information, and tells her that they'll discuss this more over dinner. Han and Chewbacca feel incredibly out of place in this environment, so they tell Bail that they're going to explore the city a little more. Chewie growls at this, telling Han that he wished he could have gotten some food first, but Han says that they'll find something out there to eat instead. At dinner, the group discusses many things, from the politics of the Empire to the life that Obi-Wan had lived on Tatooine. Luke, still grieving the loss of his aunt and uncle, tells Bail about how for his whole life he'd wanted to enjoy the Imperial Pilot Academy and fly starfighters. However, after seeing how they had treated his family in search of these two droids, he now wanted no part in life with the Empire. Leia tells him that his devotion to those whom he loved was admirable, and she proposes that Luke join the X-Wing pilot wing for the rebellion. Luke emphatically agrees. Obi-Wan expresses concerns with this plan, saying that Luke would be put in immense danger and that as his protector, it was Obi-Wan's job to ensure his safety. However, Luke waves off these concerns. He wants to fly, no matter the risk. After what the Empire had done to his family, he also sees how evil they can be, and he wants to fight for the betterment of the galaxy so that others don't endure the same fate as Owen and Beru. Obi-Wan is very skeptical about this, but eventually he decides to allow Luke to make his own decisions. Luke agrees with Leia's proposition. Inside of the city, Han and Chewie are exploring the Alderaanian capital, and they're getting their fill of street meat. Chewbacca growls about how he's still hungry, and Han tells him to be quiet. However, as they're walking together, they accidentally bump into a couple of stormtroopers who are on patrol. Han and Chewie apologize before quickly attempting to continue on their way, but sadly, this pair of patrol partners were in particularly poor moods. They berate Han and Chewie with insults, including calling Chewie a walking carpet. Han tries to shake them off, but Chewbacca takes offense to this and begins shouting back. One of the stormtroopers asks Han what that thing just said to him, and Han assures him that it was complimentary. Sadly for Solo, one of the stormtroopers recognizes him from somewhere, and he remarks about it to his partner. He says that Han looks an awful lot like one of the soldiers that he'd served with on Mimbat, and Han denies this. The trooper asks to see some identification, and Han tells him that he had forgotten it at home. This piques the trooper's suspicion, and he tells Han to wait there. As a reflex, Han pulls out his blaster and shoots first, knocking the trooper backward. His partner is momentarily stunned by what's happened, and Han shoots him as well before running away with Chewie. Many of the citizens witness this exchange, citizens who are still loyal to the Empire because their planet hadn't been blown up like in the main timeline. When other Imperials arrive to see two dead stormtroopers, the citizens let them know what happened, and the manhunt for Han and Chewie begins. They're quite easy to find due to Chewbacca's size, and despite making many Imperial troopers fall on the way, they're eventually run down and captured by other stormtroopers, who stun blast them and take them into custody. As this is happening, the secret rebels keep company with one another around the table, calling Mon Mothma, making sure that the room isn't bugged first, and other military leaders within the rebellion to plan the destruction of the Death Star. Leia informs the rebellion that she had given them the location of Dantooine as the place where the rebel base was being hidden. Mon Mothma tells her that this was well done, and that it would be the perfect place to establish a trap for the Empire. Admiral Akbar says that with time to prepare for the Death Star's arrival, he would be able to send a part of the Mon Calamari fleet there to ambush the superweapon. However, he also says that there should be a backup, as it is entirely possible that allowing Leia to return to Alderaan was all part of a tactic that was being used by Tarkin to throw the rebels off the trail of the Empire, according to sources that he had within the Empire. John Dodonna suggests that Akbar send a segment of his fleet to Yavin 4, just in case the Imperials did know the real location of the central rebel group. Akbar, Mon Mothma, and Bail Organa all agreed to this plan. They also agree that now that they have the Death Star plans, it would be safe to launch an attack with their fighter squadrons against the massive superweapon's weakness that Galen Erso had built into it for their convenience. Meanwhile, while kept in Imperial custody, Han and Chewbacca are interrogated ferociously by the Imperial contingent on Alderaan. At this point, neither of them are committed to the rebel cause, or the people that they just came to Alderaan with. It was another job to them. So when the ISB officer in charge of the investigation offers them a large sum of money, larger than Princess Leia and Senator Organa were offering to provide information, the pair gladly accept. After all, Han was in immense debt to Jabba the Hutt, and every little bit of change counted, especially when this had just been, like I said earlier, another job for him. Han tells the ISB interrogator about Obi-Wan and how the two droids had the Death Star plans that now lay within the mansion of Senator Organa. At the end of the interrogation, this officer actually keeps his word, paying Han and Chewie with enough credits to pay off Jabba the Hutt, plus a little bit of extra. Han is elated, especially upon exiting the compound, because the Empire just didn't seem to care about him being a deserter. Han was off scot-free. However, as he boards the Millennium Falcon, he can't help but feel a pang of remorse for his actions. A couple of hours following Han's departure, and after the rebel militants had organized their plan, Bail's mansion is visited by a large group of Imperial stormtroopers headed by the ISB officer with whom Han had spoken. Bail is slightly surprised, and he tells Obi-Wan to go hide with the droids. What could the Empire possibly want this time? Bail opens the door, greeting the group with a small section of his own royal security guards, and he asks how he can help. The ISB officer tells Bail that he has received word that his family has been harboring a traitor against the Empire, along with information that would be considered a threat to their national security. Bail attempts to smooth talk his way out of the situation, but the officer is young and he is stubborn. Eventually, Bail lets the Imperials in. They tear up his house, up and down, looking for the droids and the Jedi that Han had mentioned. Princess Leia stirs up quite the fuss, telling the Imperials that they had no right doing this without any evidence. The Imperial officer responds that he will do whatever he pleases in the name of securing the Empire. Luke, posing as a worker within the family's court, watches all of this take place with eager eyes. After many hours of tearing the house apart, the officer's contingent finds nothing. Obi-Wan was good at hiding, it seemed. The officer is frustrated, cursing the smuggler that had been released underneath his breath. He would keep in mind for the future to never trust that type of scum and villainy, especially when they were talking so outrageously about royalty. However, this officer still believes that it would be prudent to speak with his superiors on this matter. He passes the incident up the chain of command, and due to its high-profile nature, it eventually makes its way to the desk of Wolf Yularen, head of the ISB, who is on the Death Star at this point. As it travels through hyperspace, and while the Imperial military officials are having one of their roundtable meetings with Vader and Tarkin, Yularen brings this anomaly up with them. Tarkin, who hadn't let go of his suspicions towards the Organas, decides that it would be prudent to pay another visit to Alderaan, just to see if the senator and the royal family was keeping in line. And it hadn't been the first time that the family had been investigated by the ISB. Vader, along with Admiral Modi, say that this is a waste of time because they had a chance to end the rebellion in that instant rather than focusing on wealthy donors and politicians. However, Tarkin, being stubborn as ever, argues that they need to eliminate those funding for the rebels in order to strike fear in the hearts of those seeking to follow suit. Tarkin cannot be talked out of his opinion. So, he decides to order the Death Star to turn back towards the Alderaan system. For the next few days, events continue uninterrupted on Alderaan. Things go normal with the citizens and within Bail's household. Luke has gone to train with his old friend, Biggs, who Bail has called back from the Massassi group specifically to come and train Luke on Alderaan with some of the older Clone Wars model ships that they had on the planet. Obi-Wan remains in the shadows of Bail's mansion, simply observing and helping Luke train with his Force abilities. Because he lives longer than he does in A New Hope, the pair are able to forge a stronger bond, and in the evening, Luke ends up practicing with his new master in the bowels of Bail's house. However, as the days continue to pass, Bail receives a call from Dodonna on Massassi, who indicates that the Empire hasn't yet appeared over his planet. Akbar also calls Bail, informing him that Dantooine had been quite quiet as well. Bail is concerned, wondering if the Empire had decided to show mercy for once. However, Bail knew that mercy was not one of the strengths of Emperor Palpatine. No, something else here was at play. And when the Death Star appears in the sky overhead above Alderaan again, Bail, Leia, and Breha all feel their stomachs drop. For some reason, the Death Star had returned to their world. That could not be a good sign. Bail personally hails the command bridge on the Death Star, demanding to know what the meaning of this visit was. Tarkin tells him that despite his earlier inclination to spare Alderaan, he had heard even more whispers of rebellion brewing among the royal court, and he felt betrayed. Bail tells him that it was just that, whispers. However, Tarkin tells him that he had had enough of Bail's lies and excuses. He tells Bail to prepare for his demise. The Death Star begins to charge, and Alderaan's leadership starts to scramble. Brea, Leia, and Bail send out messages to the people telling them to evacuate immediately because of the massive superweapon overhead. Obi-Wan can feel the darkness above, and he can sense the presence of his former Padawan aboard the Death Star. Luke and Biggs hop into some of the old Ark model ships that they'd been training in together, prepared to take on the massive battle station above. Many of the Alderaanians are confused, wondering why this giant space station had once again appeared in the sky above their planet. But, despite being scared, they oblige the requests of their leaders to evacuate. The city is full of people trying to leave, and many of the Imperials attempt to maintain orderly conduct of citizens. Yet, in frenzies of fear, many of the fleeing populace end up shoving through the stormtrooper guards at the barriers that are set up to monitor traffic flow. The once peaceful city is now filled with people storming to the exits, trying to leave. Indeed, many of them do escape. However, in Tarkin's cruelty, he orders that multiple TIE fighter squadrons be scrambled to intercept and destroy fleeing citizens. Many of the initial fleeing ships are wiped out, but there are also plenty that manage to escape. Vader cautions Tarkin against such actions, stating that there was no reason to be massacring these loyal citizens of the Empire, but that the man on his ideological stance that the galaxy needed to fear his new weapon, along with the Empire as a whole, was set in stone. Tarkin wanted to maintain peace in his own way. Despite the carnage of Tarkin's attack, there is some good that comes out of the situation. Because of the TIE fighter focus on fleeing ships, Luke and Biggs are able to blend in far better than they are in A New Hope. The pair of them fly their Ark starfighters from the Republic era near the Death Star, not triggering any suspicion. However, using the Force, Vader is able to sense the presence of somebody with Force sensitivity nearby, and he tells Tarkin that he is leaving the bridge to discover which ship that was. Tarkin scoffs at Vader, telling him that he would leave in the hour closest to their triumph over these rebels. Vader, however, is unfazed, responding by telling Tarkin that his mandate is from the Emperor to investigate instances where he can tell that a Force user is nearby and kill them, especially if they were Jedi. Tarkin still makes fun of Vader, but he permits him to leave. Vader hops in his personal fighter, accompanied by a small squadron of TIE fighters, and proceeds to pilot around, looking to the Force to guide him. At this time, Luke and Biggs are approaching the Death Star trench. While they had initially had success blending in, the defense turrets begin to notice their approach, forcing the pair of them to weave in and out of green laser fire from the Death Star. Soon after as well, Luke begins to sense a dark presence approaching behind him. Something inside of him tells Luke that this was the Dark Lord that Obi-Wan had told him so much about, the one that had killed his father. Hey folks, if you're enjoying this story, please consider subscribing and turning on notifications as we update this channel weekly with new What If content. Now, back to the story. Vader's squadron of TIEs moves in, and the pair were now being pursued by Vader and his fellow pilots. There are too many of them to handle by themselves, so Biggs and Luke are forced to pull out of the trench in order to navigate more open space. The two of them request backup on an open channel for anyone who would listen, but it seems that most of the Alderaan citizens nearby were too engaged in their own escape to pay heed. However, there's one starship that swoops in, and Luke thought that he recognized it. When he heard a familiar voice over the radio, he's quite pleased. It's Han, with Chewie roaring in the background. Han tells him that he had sold them out to the Empire and that he was really sorry. However, now that he paid off his debt to Jabba, he was back to fight these guys. It isn't completely altruistic, though, as Han tells Luke that he hopes the Senator gives him a large payday for helping out. The Millennium Falcon ends up swooping in with the two Ark fighters, providing some coverage from the attacks of Vader and the TIEs. Han actually ends up destroying many of the TIE fighters, but he's soon blasted a few too many times himself, and he's forced to retreat. It's only Biggs, Luke, Vader, and a few remaining TIE fighter pilots now. Biggs tries his best to stay in the fight, but he's quickly shot down with superior piloting of Vader, who still remains a galaxy-renowned pilot. Luke continues onwards, his heart beating faster. Now, it was just him. Vader targets him, and Luke nears closer to the exhaust vent. Luke, remembering his training with Obi-Wan, takes a deep breath, concentrating on the Force, and he fires his proton torpedoes. However, at that same time, Vader also fires upon Luke's Ark fighter. Luke pulls up just in time, though, avoiding the blast. Vader and his small contingent of TIE fighters follow suit, and they quickly move out of the way as the massive superweapon explodes, just like it does in A New Hope. However, this time, the event transpires over a key planet to the Imperial regime. Luke breathes a heavy sigh of relief, joining Han Solo in the sky. there's a steady exodus of ships taking place, so Luke and Han are able to blend into the crowd and make their way back to the surface of Alderaan. Vader, frustrated with Tarkin's blind cruelty, mutters that the Grand Moff had gotten just what he deserved, and he orders the TIE fighter pilots to land on Alderaan and find alternative means of transport. For the moment, the Empire's superweapon had been defeated. On the surface of Alderaan, Vader visits the Imperial garrison that had detained Han and Chewie, and he demands that a shuttle take him and his pilots back to Coruscant in order to report to the Empire. The military officials gladly oblige, sensing Vader's anger with what had just taken place. There also seemed to be something else clouding Vader's vision. He couldn't help but continue to feel the sense and the presence of a young man that he had almost defeated in the Death Star trench, and he was puzzled by it. Who could have possibly taught that young man such mastery of the Force? There's another familiar presence that nagged at Vader, but he couldn't quite place his finger on. Vader commands that the Imperials bring Bail's family into Imperial custody, as clearly they had stirred up the fears of their population against the government. So, as Vader leaves the planet, they happily oblige. An Imperial governor is instilled in the system, and he moves into the Organa's palace, forcing Luke and Obi-Wan to move into the mountains of the planet before they're found. After this near miss, Rebel leadership is more careful about where they leave their fleets. The Massassi group becomes more centralized and better coordinated, knowing that there was always the possibility that Imperial leadership could operate in an irrational manner. In the Imperial government, a massive commotion is caused. The destruction of the Death Star has led to a significant amount of space debris falling into the orbit of Alderaan, some of which is even falling into the atmosphere and has the chance of hitting citizens. Because of the recent dissolving of the Senate, there is no one to advocate directly for the government intervention in this humanitarian crisis. In fact, Imperial media dictates to the galaxy that this was an unprovoked attack on an experimental, non-violent space station that was paying a visit to Alderaan in order to promote an Imperial agenda of progress, peace, and job creation. While Bail is in custody at this time, the former senator speak out. Mon Mothma leaks the Death Star plans to the galaxy, showing them that this was intended to be a weapon that was going to be used against Alderaan. Some citizens of the galaxy believe the rebel leader, and they throw their support behind the alliance. Others continue to believe the Empire, justifying their position by saying that the rebels had faked the plans and that the Empire still had the galaxy's best interests at heart. Palpatine addresses the galaxy at this time, ensuring them that this was only more rebel fear-mongering from the same camp that had associated with Saw Gerrera's partisans in the past. Some become far more polarized, and the conflict becomes heated. In the Rocky Mountains of Alderaan, Luke sharpens his Force ability. He is saddened by both the loss of Biggs and of his family. However, Luke channels those emotions into his training, using them to focus on bringing goodness to the galaxy. Obi-Wan knows that one day he'll have to take Luke to Yoda for even further training, and to tell him the truth about his lineage. But for now, the two stay on Alderaan, preparing for more conflict. Every so often, Han and Chewie drop by to visit, but they're mostly occupied by their adventures in the greater galaxy. They never formally join the rebellion, as they don't have as much money as the other employers, but they do take an odd smuggling job here and there. Sometimes, that involves bringing Luke and Obi-Wan supplies in a very discreet manner. How does this change impact the end of our story? Let's find out. In the end, the galaxy is launched even deeper into turmoil. Vader speaks with Sidious about the Force-sensitive kid that he had encountered on Alderaan, and Sidious tells him to continue to search the galaxy for him and whoever his master may be. Vader commands the Inquisitorius to scour the galaxy, searching for the pair of Force wielders. Eventually, the Organas are imprisoned for supposed crimes against the Empire and inciting their people against a lawful order from a galactic government. However, as the new governor of Alderaan becomes increasingly tyrannical in the implementation of Imperial edicts, many of the planet's citizens begin to question the legitimacy of Imperial rule. Some of them form underground movements associated with the Alliance, and they begin to formulate plans to propagate the ideas of the Organas throughout the remaining population of Alderaan. As the galaxy dives deeper into war, both sides dig deeper. Conflict intensifies, and the search for the Jedi heats up. There seems to be no end in sight for this bloody conflict. Yet, as the Jedi and the Rebels continue to inspire more hope across the galaxy, rumors of Luke and Obi-Wan spread, and people start to remember the days when they lived in freedom. Slowly but surely, the revolution spreads. Palpatine's days seem to be numbered. It's never wise, though, to underestimate the power of the dark side. Hey there folks, I really hope that you enjoyed today's what if scenario. If you did, please consider checking out this other video, What If Ahsoka Tano Never Left the Jedi Order? Have a great day everyone, wherever you are in the galaxy. And, as always, I really hope that you've gotten your daily dose of Bantha Stew.